The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back to the Audio Stash today, Tuesday, April 3rd. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us at NORML to end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit NORML.org. Yesterday was a jam-packed show with information and news. Really wonderful news there from New Mexico, becoming the 12th state to allow medical marijuana. Governor Richardson signing that bill yesterday. Today we've got updates on the legislative season and other bills that are moving through different state houses around the country. Also today, I want folks to take a moment to vote for us at podcastalley.com. That's a podcast directory service. We have a link to vote for NORML's daily audio stash at Podcast Alley right up on our website today at NORMLAudiostash.com. It is an easy way to help us raise the visibility of this podcast and spread the word about marijuana law reform. So take a moment today to visit NORMLAudiostash.com and cast your vote for the audio stash up at Podcast Alley. Also, a number of folks sent in emails asking to hear more from Dr. Thomas Ungerleider from the University of California at Los Angeles. He's Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry out there. Dr. Ungerleider interviewed with us for the Schaefer Commission specials. And what we did was we found the complete interview. We cut that out right now. We're going to play that for you today after our Government at Work segment. Do your part to get involved. It only takes a computer and the ability to write an email, folks, really, to put that issue out there in front of elected officials. Someone else who wants stoners to stand up and get involved will be joining us on Friday this week, the legendary Tommy Chong. Tommy's going to be speaking at the NORML Legal Seminars in Aspen, Colorado this summer, and he's now a very active member of NORML's advisory board. We spoke with Tommy last year on the Audio Stash in September when we interviewed about his book. You can link up to that interview right in the Audio Stash archive under guest interviews. So write it down, Tommy Chong, right here on the Audio Stash this Friday. We're going to have a number of high-profile guests here this month in April as we lead up to 420, which is coming up very, very quickly here. Stay tuned to the Audio Stash every single day for the latest breaking marijuana news, information, interviews with those making reform happen, along with some kickin' music and comedy. So let's get right into our regular Tuesday segment here on the Audio Stash, Government at Work. Welcome back to our Government at Work focus segment this week. Yesterday in our news, we covered that breaking news from New Mexico. New Mexico is now the 12th state to offer a medical marijuana program. And we also covered the narrow miss for the New Hampshire medical marijuana bill. The legislative season is far from over, however, so today we're presenting the legislative update from NORML's senior policy analyst, Paul Armentano. Here's that report. NORML is actively tracking legislation in 18 states: California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Michigan, Maryland, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. A complete list of all the bills, their legislative committee assignments, and online legislative alerts are available through links at normalaudiostash.com. While the majority of these bills seek to enact medical marijuana law reform or improve upon existing medical marijuana laws, several additional bills have been introduced to reduce penalties for the possession and use of marijuana for recreational purposes in Oregon, New Hampshire, and Texas, and/or regulate the production of industrial hemp in California, Oregon, and Wisconsin. In several states, NORML or NORML affiliates have worked directly with legislators to draft bills that are now being debated in the legislature, specifically in Hawaii, Oregon, and Oklahoma. In support of pending medical marijuana legislation, NORML has distributed 2,000 copies of the booklet Emerging Clinical Applications for Cannabis and Cannabinoids, a review of the recent scientific literature, to affiliates working directly with their state legislatures and bill sponsors. In several states, such as Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, legislative committee members have received individual copies of these booklets prior to legislative hearings. Almost universally, these booklets have been well received by legislators and activists on the ground. NORML has worked cooperatively with various local and national groups on the distribution effort, such as the Drug Policy Alliance of New York, Live Free New Hampshire, the Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii, the Rhode Island Patient Advocacy Coalition, the Drug Policy Alliance of New Mexico, South Carolinians for Drug Law Reform, and the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey, and several others. Listeners and members of the public can view the entire booklet online at norml.org or contact NORML at 888-67-NORML to obtain individual copies of the booklet or request multiple copies for lobbying efforts. NORML has also presented testimony in favor of pending marijuana law reform legislation before numerous state committees, including in Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and has worked cooperatively with citizens in various other states on drafting their official testimony. Copies of NORML's testimony is available online through links we have at normalaudiostash.com. NORML has also generated more than 4,100 emails so far in 2007 from constituents to their state elected officials in favor of marijuana law reform. The largest amount of emails have been sent to legislators in support of these measures in California for industrial hemp, in Illinois for medical marijuana, in Michigan for medical marijuana, in New Hampshire for decriminalization, in New Mexico for their medical marijuana legislation, in South Carolina for medical marijuana as well, and in Texas for their decriminalization and affirmative defense legislation. For specific information on state bills and legislative efforts, please visit the norml.org Take Action section. You can also contact NORML's senior policy analyst Paul Armentano directly, toll-free at 888-67-NORML. That was the legislative update from NORML's senior policy analyst, Paul Armentano.
This is Soja, Soldiers of Jah Army, and you're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Big up yourself.
Time for a bit of music here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash today, and a great track we have for you. Here's KRS-One with You Gon' Go. This was found up at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. Man, we love playing KRS-One here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. We have links to their new albums up on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
I'm bringing back the style that others have pushed to the rear. Now you see me, now you don't, now I'm everywhere. Maybe you can see the knowledge does reign supreme. Rap is like a ball club and I coach the team. Move the crowd, that's what MC mean. Now how many albums I got? 12, 13. I told y'all before, you were not just doing hip hop. You are hip hop. Them jokers need to stop. Be hip hop. I mastered this and him, her, they, them, that, when she and he did not. I speak a lot. I hit him in a weakest spot. Come see me rock, yo, you'll leave in shock. KRS, you ever wonder why he's so hot? It's because he's not pop, yo, he's hip hop. West to east, the sound of the police will rock. If you don't love this, you won't have the heat I got. Discipline if you're listening to beats the cops. Fuck the dumb shit, yo, we gotta teach the tops. They say I preach a lot, and last year they took the cheapest shot, but this year the beat will knock. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go. I'm still standing, demanding, planning my next jamming. Cats wanna really see me start blamming. Put away the cannon for this overstanding. I'm landing, let the music play like Shannon. I'm so hot, why not? I bring all the fans in. Watch me now, come alive like Peter Frampton. Listen to me, people, listen to me loud and clear. It's time that I find out what type of people up in here. When I shout out the classic, if you know it, say yeah. South Bronx, my philosophy. Black cop, you must learn. Yeah, we gonna do it up in here. I'm still standing, and rappers be mad, cause they know they'll get burnt like the American flag in Baghdad. All they do is blab, that head chatter. While the dopest MC always a dead rapper. I'm a real live rapper, I'm out to set it. I pay dues while you crew still on credit. You talk that shit till I come out from school, and all y'all sound like Trina saying that's cool. Time for the streets again. Time for them cats that pop gaps into the mic you speaking in. I'm creeping in with 100 soldiers. When I step on the stage, it's over. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go. They don't play me a lot. KRS you don't see a lot. On TV a lot, but I do MC a lot. I don't duck and hide when I see the cops. I'm free with the knowledge, I'm free to block. Live on your radio, I'm sending my rhyme. As you can see, I'm behind enemy lines. You already heard about plenty of crime. Now hear about the sciences that could really open your mind. I only got a little bit of time to rhyme before the producer over here says, okay, that's fine. So let's get to it, I got my whole squad with me. On top of all that, I got God with me. You can go far with me. From New York to Atlanta to LA, you know they all with me. You might not see me on this station, cause this is a rap city. KRS means a hip hop nation. Even though y'all chase ends, why can't we be friends? It all depends. Cat wanna thug it out. Isn't it true that hip hop was bigger when we all loved it out? Look at the difference in raps. See what I'm spitting of facts. Now that anyone can rap, the industry collapse. No one's special anymore. Variety is gone for sure. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go. I know where we can go to see how a real MC go. No video, no radio, just a live show. Come on now, you gon' go.
Legends of Hip Hop, KRS-One, here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. We have links to their albums up at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance on our website today at normalaudiostash.com. Next up today, we're going to hear our complete interview with Dr. Thomas Ungerleider. Dr. Ungerleider interviewed with us for the Schaefer Commission special. We did get a bunch of emails from folks asking to hear more from the good doctor, so here is our complete interview that we conducted with Dr. Thomas Ungerleider. Dr. Thomas Ungerleider is Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at UCLA. He sat on the 1972 Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, also known as the Schaefer Commission. He joins us to talk about his work with the Commission. Doctor, tell us how you became part of the Schaefer Commission in 1971. I understand you were invited on because of your prior work.
Apparently so. I was working with LSD. We saw a lot of adverse reactions here in Southern California. Timothy Leary was out here, and when people started having bad trips, they brought them to UCLA Medical Center for some reason, and Timothy Leary was inviting me out to see what was going on out in Orange County up in the hills where he had a couple hundred disciples and where they would take LSD. So I went out and gave psychological tests to these people and had a chance to see some of the reasons behind the adverse reactions that we were getting at our medical center in psychiatry. I was running a ward at the time. And I suspect that background had some effect and reason for me being appointed to the commission. They were concerned about marijuana and knowing that marijuana was a psychedelic by some classifications, just like LSD. I think they assumed that I would be very negative and very worried about the effects of marijuana, just as I was with LSD, and that was the kind of input they were looking for at the commission at that time.
And when they asked you onto the commission, how was it described to you?
Well, basically to take a look at marijuana use throughout the world, and particularly in our country, to see what the effects were and what the best social policy would be, whether we should have a pure prohibition or pure legalization or somewhere in the middle. That was the charge, basically.
And Doctor, what was your understanding of marijuana before this commission?
Well, I had been seeing, as a psychiatrist who was subspecializing in drug abuse, I was seeing a lot of kids, teenagers, who were using marijuana as well as a mixture of marijuana with other drugs. So I was pretty well informed about marijuana, and I knew what it was, and I knew some of the problems and concerns that parents had. We did a lot of things. In fact, we had a group called DARE that we started, not to be confused with the more current DARE group, but a group of kids who were using music instead of drugs, and we're trying to reach parents to be able to talk to their kids about drug use. So this was the scene at that time.
What kinds of impacts had you seen marijuana having on individuals and society at the time, and did you see a broader view of it through the Commission's work?
Actually, I had seen, and I knew marijuana was not a benign substance, particularly in young people. So I saw that, but I saw that from an individual patient population study that I had as a private practitioner at UCLA. So I knew that it was not harmless, but I also felt that the question of should people be locked up for possession of marijuana, should they be arrested for possession, that seemed like a huge waste of resources, which it turned out to be. And so we went around the country and had hearings and met with a lot of health professionals, law enforcement, the old Bureau of Narcotics, the predecessor of the DEA. They were our guides on many of our trips. And we went all over the world looking and trying to find out how other countries handled this problem or didn't handle this problem.
And Doctor, tell us, were there any surprises for you in the course of the commission?
Well, one of the big surprises was how much mythology there was about the fact that this drug would be taken and used, it could be misused, and could affect people so severely. And we found that throughout the world, they'd made adaptations to this. And in many places, there was de facto legalization, where people would use it and people would not have problems, and it would not be a real problem at all. But we were concerned to see how those models might be helpful or not helpful to what was going on in America. We found really that looking at our statistics and things, we found that marijuana was not a threat to the health, welfare, or safety of our nation. But we didn't want to encourage it and suggest that we have an alcohol model where it was taxed and licensed and everybody would be advertising for it and encouraging it. We were concerned about that. So right from the beginning, we were trying to synthesize these two kinds of separate findings.
And Dr. Ungerleiner, one of the things that frustrated the commission somewhat was the lack of scientific research on marijuana up to that point in the 1970s. You went on to conduct some groundbreaking research related to marijuana, and I have to ask if your involvement with the Schaefer Commission spurred your interest in that realm of research.
Well, when the commission was meeting, the active ingredient, the psychoactive ingredient of marijuana, tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, had not been isolated by the Israeli scientist Mishulam in Jerusalem, and had been isolated as the commission was meeting. So there were no studies then, but it was a fertile way to begin after the commission to take a look at possible medical use of marijuana. That was something that we didn't know much about, and we just said we have to wait and defer until the scientific studies are done. And because I had been on the commission, I was able to get supplies of marijuana from Mississippi, where it was grown, and to give it to people in a variety of studies at UCLA. Initially, we took a look at the physiologic effects of marijuana, and then later on we began to look at the effects of marijuana on various disease states. And by this time, the government folks were involved with Marinol, which was an oral pill with just a psychoactive ingredient, and we were able to look at the effects on various diseases. And we did a big study in nausea and vomiting of cancer, chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and multiple sclerosis, spasticity, pain relief. And we accidentally found the intraocular pressure reduction from marijuana that helps in glaucoma patients. So there was a lot of activity, and I sort of naively thought once we showed the real problems, and a lot of others were doing the same thing, people would have to face the fact that marijuana had medical usefulness in certain selected cases by a physician as part of the patient-physician relationship. And, of course, that wasn't what happened at all. What happened was that there was a lot of challenge to this by law enforcement particularly. And that tied into something else that we had seen. We saw that there was something called the drug abuse industrial complex. The commission even saw that. Huge amounts of resources going in to law enforcement in particular, buying hardware, helicopters, just doing all kinds of things. And in those days, locking up people and arresting over 200,000 people with marijuana. And the commission never would have believed the 800,000 figure per year of arrests for marijuana possession. But because of the drug abuse industrial complex, people who were getting a lot of money to do research on the negative things and people who were working in enforcement really opposed any use of marijuana medically. So that's kind of where we are today, with more and more studies being done and people kind of afraid to take those reports and make a social policy that would be a wise one.
And when the commission drafted the final report to be issued to the President and Congress, I know there must have been some compromises to reach this consensus in the report, but what did you and your fellow members of this commission hope would happen based on your report?
Well, we hope to raise the awareness of this, and we hope that states themselves would adopt some of these provisions, and indeed about 11 states with about a third of the population in the country did modify, based on our work, that modify their attitudes and legal policies towards marijuana. So that was kind of a good thing. And I think some of the people initially had no idea about marijuana, some of the commissioners who were not in medical areas. And they would say, well, we hear that in Morocco they lock people up and have dungeons, and that seems to help. So we would go over there in Morocco, and of course they would say, what are you talking about? We don't do that at all. So we were able to dispel the myths about it for the commissioners. In fact, we named the report Marijuana Signal of Misunderstanding. And that is just as true today, I think.
We can now see clearly that President Nixon had no intention of taking any recommendations from the commission that would move marijuana out of the newly created Schedule I category. But, was that dismissal by Nixon and the political fallout surprising?
No, not really. It wasn't much of a surprise. Because a lot of the people who had public pronouncements privately would contact us and say, please excuse what we're saying in public. We are trying to support our current policy, and so we privately may agree with you, but publicly we can't. And actually what the biggest surprise that I had just occurred several years ago when they took and declassified some of the things that President Nixon was saying about us. And for example, 1 month after we were appointed, before we even began, he was talking to some of his chiefs, talking pretty negative things about all the people investigating this. But then we knew, you see, this was a national commission on marijuana and drug abuse. It was not a presidential commission. So here was the Congress mandating this commission, and the president, the reluctant president, had to appoint people from both political parties. So we were really, the cards were stacked against us no matter what we found.
Doctor, you're based there in Los Angeles, where Proposition 215 and SB 420, there with medical access, is in process. And in many ways, that's all put into place for medical patients, the system recommended by the Schaefer Commission, where possession is non-criminal, but cultivation and sale are still technically illegal. So seeing all of this in action today in California, does that idea work?
Well, I think it's pretty much kind of a potpourri of many things, and there are some patients who are really benefiting from this, and there are other people who are misusing the clinics. And so different clinics, there's so many of them out here, there's over 150. So many of them have different criteria for who they'll give the marijuana to, and of course Marinol's available now in pharmacies, but it doesn't work as well. It's oral. The absorption time is different and difficult to predict. So there's a lot of things going on like that need remedy. And then there's also the overlay. The drug czar, the last one or the one before the last one, declared war on doctors. He said if you even talk to a patient about medical marijuana and suggest that it could ease their pain or anything, we will take your license and try you and put you in jail. Now, this is the wrong thing to say to the physicians of our country, and it solidified the support for medical marijuana. So there's huge positives when you try to find out how people feel about medical marijuana and whether it should be available. And the entire physician and academic communities have banded together in opposition to this kind of dictatorship by this former man. His name was McCaffrey, a general, who did probably more damage to the medical treatment than anybody ever has, although it did rebound against him.
Now, Tom, away from medical marijuana and looking, at recreational use, how do we find some countenance to the current idea of decriminalization, where personal possession is non-criminal, but marijuana isn't made easily available in a regulated market?
Yeah, well, it seems like an imperfect adjustment to an imperfect world, where the idea of arresting people is absolutely bizarre. And I think there's great decriminalization emphasis and interest, and that's going to be fought out state by state, I think. And we were worried on the commission about endorsing any kind of use of marijuana that was non-medical, even in those days, because we were concerned that we might get into the alcohol model. Alcohol is by far the worst drug of abuse. Everybody knows that now. but we might get into real problems with alcohol. If you got marijuana being advertised, like Miller Lite beer on the radio and television and everywhere you look, that certainly has a major effect. And we've got our young people out there too. So I think it's kind of a compromise and a good one. And the Controlled Substances Act, which was written in the days of our commission, not having to do with anything but the commission, they were scheduling drugs on the basis of toxicity, and they put erroneously and temporarily, as they tell us, marijuana up there with heroin and LSD in Schedule 1 as having no medical use. They haven't rechanged that yet, even though it's long past time to reschedule marijuana and take it out of Schedule 1, drop it down to perhaps with Valium and the benzodiazepines. But that's something that hasn't happened yet. But it's up to the Food and Drug Administration, who's become very political and very, very frightened. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
And, Doctor, do you think we should look at this again? I mean, is the 1972 Commission's research enough, or should there be a new commission from Congress and the President to seek answers to this question of marijuana in our society?
Well, ideally we should be, but there's so much concern and moving of our resources into the war and people being concerned about that, it's really hard to get totally behind some other of these domestic changes that we need. I would certainly hope that this would be changed in the next couple of years, but it's hard to predict.
Dr. Thomas Ungerleiner interviewed with us about the 1972 Schaefer Commission. He's Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at UCLA and sat on the commission. You've been listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow.